Aiden Blake hated delays, especially when they involved rain, traffic, and a board meeting that could have been wrapped up in 15 minutes if his CFO hadn't insisted on dragging out every chart. He stepped out of the sleek black town car, the doorman rushing to hold an umbrella over his head. But before Aiden could take a step toward the golden-lit entrance of the Langsford Hotel, a blur of motion to his right caught his attention. She was standing at the edge of the curb, soaked to the skin, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her red blouse clung to her like second skin, her jeans dripping, her dark brown hair plastered against her face. But she wasn't crying, she looked furious and freezing. "Miss," Aiden said before he could stop himself. The woman turned to him, blinking against the downpour. Her lips were trembling, but her chin was high. "I'm fine," she said, voice tight. "You're shivering." I said I'm fine. He nodded once, then handed the umbrella off to the doorman and shrugged off his tailored charcoal jacket, stepping right into the rain and draping it over her shoulders. She looked startled. "Wait, what are you?" "There's a fireplace in the lobby," he said. "You'll get hypothermia if you stand out here any longer." She hesitated, clearly thinking it over, then finally nodded. The doorman opened the door and Aiden guided her inside. The lobby of the Langsford was warm and glowing, the faint scent of white roses and firewood filling the air. She stopped in front of the fireplace, rubbing her arms. "Thank you," she said after a long pause. "Really?" He took a moment to look at her properly. Her eyes were green, bright, expressive, and wary. Her cheekbones were sharp, her lips full. Even soaked and irritated, she was stunning. "I'm Aiden," he said. She gave a soft laugh. "Of course you are." He raised a brow. "What's that supposed to mean?" She looked down at the marble floor, then back up. "You've got that look, perfect suit, perfect hair, perfect name. Let me guess, you own this place or something?" He hesitated for half a second too long. She stared at him. "Wait. You do?" "I'm the CEO of Blake Holdings," he admitted. "We own the Langsford and about 20 other properties like it." Her jaw dropped slightly. "Okay, I was kidding," he smiled faintly. "You're not wrong, though," she exhaled. "Well, that explains the very expensive jacket I'm currently dripping all over." "You can keep it," he said. "That's not necessary, it's fine," he said simply. "What's your name?" "Catalina. Catalina Rivers." He liked the way it sounded, strong, different. "You weren't waiting for someone, were you?" he asked, her face changed, just a flash. "I was supposed to meet someone here for a job interview. They never showed." Aiden frowned. "What kind of job?" "Receptionist. At an event planning firm. They gave me the wrong address." And then it started pouring. He looked down at her wet sneakers, the way her jeans were frayed at the cuffs. There was something about her resilient, honest, and something else he couldn't put his finger on. "You're not from New York," he guessed. "Upstate originally," she said. "I moved here 3 months ago, still figuring it out." He nodded slowly, then glanced toward the concierge. "Catalina," he said, stepping forward. "Come with me." She narrowed her eyes. "Why?" "Because you're freezing and I'm not letting you walk back into that storm." "I'm not going upstairs with you," she said flatly. He laughed. "Relax, I'm not that kind of man." He led her past the elevators to a private lounge behind a velvet rope. The staff didn't question it as he opened the door and flicked on the lights. The room was elegant and warm, with a leather sofa, a fireplace, and a minibar. "Sit," he said. "I'll get you something dry to change into." 10 minutes later, he returned with a hotel robe and a plush towel. She disappeared into the bathroom, and when she returned, her hair was loosely tied back and she looked less like a drowned cat and more like a woman who could run a company if she wanted to. "Better?" he asked. She nodded, wrapping the robe tighter around herself. "This is not how I expected my day to go. I'm starting to think neither of us expected this." He poured her a glass of red wine and handed it off. She took it carefully, her fingers brushing his. "So, Mr. CEO," she said, sitting on the edge of the couch, "do you always rescue women in the rain?" He leaned against the bar. "Only the ones who look like they're about to challenge a hurricane." She laughed for the first time, and it was the kind of laugh that warmed a room more than any fire could. They talked for another hour about her degree in communications, her move to the city, the job that fell through. She had dreams of opening a creative agency one day. He listened, actually listened, and found himself leaning in more than he meant to. When she finally stood, the robe brushing her knees, she looked up at him and said, "Thank you for all of this." "Let me get you a car," he said. "You've already done enough. Humor me." Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. A black SUV pulled up moments later. She opened the door, then hesitated. "You saved me from a miserable night, and you gave me the most interesting evening I've had in a long time," he replied. She smiled. "Maybe I'll see you again." "I hope so," he said honestly, and with that she was gone. Aiden stood on the curb long after the SUV pulled away, his jacket still soaked, his thoughts spinning. He didn't believe in fate. He believed in numbers, strategy, power moves. But Catalina Rivers had walked into his hotel soaked, annoyed, and absolutely breathtaking, and now she was in his head. He had no idea who she really was or what she wanted out of life. All he knew was this. He wanted to see her again, and something told him she wasn't just passing through. Catalina didn't expect to see him again. She'd told herself it had been a one-off, a strange, rainy night warped by exhaustion and disappointment. The kind of night that didn't happen twice in New York City. She hadn't even kept the robe. She'd folded it neatly and left it with the driver who dropped her off at her apartment in Queens, along with Aiden's jacket dry, pressed, and returned like a debt repaid. But 2 days later, as she balanced a tray of espresso shots at her new temp gig, a catering gig for some elite fashion fundraiser in Tribeca, she found herself staring straight into the last pair of eyes she expected to see. Aiden Blake stood at the far end of the gallery, dressed in a midnight blue tuxedo, speaking with a group of investors. His posture was relaxed, but his gaze carried weight, the kind that commanded attention without requiring it. He hadn't seen her yet, but she could feel the air shift the moment he did, his head tilted slightly. Their eyes locked. Catalina turned sharply on her heel and walked directly into a server carrying a tower of champagne flutes. Glass shattered. Liquid soaked her shoes, someone gasped. Aiden was moving before she could even find a towel. "Don't," she hissed, crouching to help the other server. "Go back to your billionaire corner and pretend I don't exist." But it was too late. He was already beside her, crouching low, helping to gather shards of crystal stemware. "You're really bad at pretending not to exist," he said quietly. She didn't look at him. "Didn't think you'd be the type to show up at a fashion event. I underwrite the scholarship fund they're promoting." "Of course you do," he glanced at her. "Why are you working this?" She stood, brushing her hands. "Because the universe thinks it's funny. I could help you find something better." "No." "Why not?" Catalina turned to face him fully now, her chest rising just a little too fast. "Because I don't want to owe you anything." "You don't. That robe was probably worth more than my rent. You returned it. And your jacket. You didn't have to." "But I did." They stared at one another as a manager came over, clearly panicked, whispering something about insurance and liability. Catalina waved him off, assuring him she was fine, and then started toward the back of the gallery to change out of her soaked shoes. Aiden followed. "You're not supposed to be back here," she said without turning around. "Neither are you." Technically, Catalina stopped in front of a crate of floral centerpieces and folded her arms. "You have a habit of showing up at weird moments. I'd say the feeling is mutual." She narrowed her eyes. "You don't even know me. I know you didn't flinch when heels broke around you. I know you took a job you're overqualified for because you're trying to survive, and I know you're not impressed by tuxedos or titles. None of that tells you who I am." "No," he said, stepping closer, "but it makes me want to find out." Her breath caught just for a second. "You live in a completely different world," she said. "You probably take meetings on planes and eat things I can't pronounce. And you live in a world where you don't let people fix things for you, even when they want to." Catalina exhaled. "Why do you care?" Aiden gave her a long look. "I don't really know yet, but I do." For a moment, neither of them said anything. The sounds of clinking glasses and soft jazz filtered in from the other room. Then Catalina said, "There's a supply closet behind you. If you're going to keep following me around, at least pretend to help me find dry socks." He opened the door and stepped aside. Inside was a cluttered mess of boxes, bottled water, and extra dishware. Catalina grabbed a fresh pair of socks from a crate marked "Emergency," then sat on a crate and pulled off her wet shoes. Aiden leaned against the doorframe, watching her without speaking. "You know," she said finally, tugging the socks on, "I used to think rich people just floated through life. That they didn't notice anything outside their bubble. Some don't. But you do." "I try. Doesn't mean I always get it right." She looked up at him. "What happens if you don't?" "I fix it." Catalina stood. "Not everything can be fixed, maybe not. But I'd rather try than walk away." Something flickered in her expression. She didn't say anything else, just walked past him back toward the party. He followed at a distance. Watched as she slipped behind a bar and grabbed a tray of hors d'oeuvres, her expression composed again, her posture straight. Like nothing had happened, but something had happened. He wasn't sure what it meant yet, but he knew this much: she wasn't just interesting. She was unforgettable. He didn't believe in fate, but he believed in instincts. And every instinct he had was screaming not to let her disappear again. Catalina wasn't sure what surprised her more, that Aiden Blake had shown up at the fundraiser and followed her into a storage closet, or that he hadn't disappeared after. He could have gone back to his world of polished glass towers and discreet chauffeurs. Instead, 5 days later, he stood in front of her tiny walk-up apartment holding a paper bag that smelled like roasted garlic, wearing jeans and a gray wool coat that somehow made him look even more expensive. "I figured," he said, glancing at the cracked concrete steps beneath his feet, "you might not be in the mood for another night of reheated noodles." Catalina blinked. "How do you know what I eat?" "I don't. But judging by how you hesitated before opening the door, I'm guessing I guessed right." She stepped aside. "You're relentless. I'm patient. My kitchen is basically a hallway. I like hallways." Inside, she cleared a spot on the counter, moving a stack of mail and an unopened bag of flour. The apartment was small, but it was clean, and it smelled faintly of vanilla candles and lemon cleaner. Aiden set the food down, then turned in a slow circle. "You have books on every windowsill," he said. Catalina wiped her hands on a dish towel. "They don't fit on the shelf. They're organized by color. Don't judge me." "I'd never." He paused. "Actually, I would have guessed alphabetical, too predictable." He handed her a takeout container. She opened it and blinked. "This is from Giacomo's. I know the chef. He owed me a favor." Catalina grabbed 2 forks and sat at the narrow table wedged between the fridge and the wall. Aiden sat across from her and took one look at the crooked leg of the table before reaching down and sliding a thin book under it. She raised an eyebrow. "You fix furniture now?" "Only when it's about to dump pasta in my lap." They ate in silence for a few minutes, the occasional honk or siren outside the only interruption. Then Catalina said, "You're not here to talk about table legs." "No. I'm not. So, I want to offer you something. I'm not taking your money." "It's not money." She set her fork down. "I'm opening a new division," he said. "Something creative, storytelling, branding, immersive experiences. I need someone who understands how people connect emotionally. Someone who sees things differently. And you think that's me. You're not afraid to speak your mind. You see past polish. You listen, even when you don't want to." "Sounds like a personality disorder." "It sounds like someone I'd trust to challenge me." Catalina leaned back. "Why?" "Because you're not trying to impress me." She looked at him for a long moment. "You'd give me a job just like that." "No, I'd give you a trial, 3 weeks. If you hate it, we walk away. No hard feelings." She studied him. "What's the catch? You'll be working directly with me." "Which means long hours, fast turnarounds, and no sugar coating." "I don't sugarcoat." "Then we'll get along just fine." Catalina stood and began clearing the dishes. Aiden watched her, then said, "What are you afraid of?" She didn't answer right away. She rinsed the containers and placed them in the recycling bin. Then she turned. "I'm afraid I'll like it, and then it'll disappear." His voice dropped. "I'm not going anywhere." Catalina crossed her arms. "You say that now." "I say that because I mean it. You don't even know what I'm like under pressure. I know you didn't flinch in a full gallery when everything went sideways." She glanced away, then back. 3 weeks, 3 weeks. "What's the name of this new division?" He smiled. "Haven't decided yet. Thought maybe you'd help me with that." Catalina exhaled, then reached for her phone. "What time do I start tomorrow?" 9 sharp. "I don't own anything that screams corporate Maven. I'll have a driver pick you up. I'm not showing up in a car that costs more than my tuition debt. Then I'll meet you at the coffee shop on 38th and we'll walk in together." She tilted her head. "You walk when I want to think. Do you always get what you want?" "Not always." He stood and reached for his coat. "But I'm willing to work for it." Catalina opened the door. "You're impossible. Only when it counts." He stepped outside, then turned. "See you at 9. She closed the door behind him and leaned against it, heart pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with career moves or salary potential. She didn't know what scared her more, falling into something she couldn't control, or the fact that she already wanted to. Catalina stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of Aiden's midtown penthouse, the skyline glittering like a city made of stars. Her heels dangled from one hand, the other gripping a champagne flute she'd barely touched. The gala had ended an hour ago, but the buzz of the night still clung to her skin like perfume. Behind her, Aiden loosened his tie and poured himself a glass of whiskey. "You hated it, didn't you?" She turned slowly. "I didn't hate it. I tolerated it with grace," he laughed, setting the bottle down. "You only glared at 4 people. That's restraint." "I didn't glare. I evaluated." "You evaluated the senator's wife to the point she almost dropped her clutch. She called me the pretty assistant." Aiden raised his glass. "She also asked you for branding advice 10 minutes later." Catalina stared at him, her expression unreadable. "You think this is sustainable?" "What? This thing, us?" "I'm walking around in a dress that probably cost more than my first car, making conversation with people who think Brooklyn is a concept, not a place. And I'm doing it with you. The man who owns half the buildings they gossip in." His gaze held hers. "You think I care what they think? I think you've lived your life not having to." He took a step closer, his voice quiet. "And you think I don't see how hard you've worked to stand in the same room as them and not flinch?" "I flinch," she said. "Just not where anyone can see." "I see you." She looked away. "That's the problem." "No, that's the point." Catalina's voice dropped. "You're not afraid of falling, Aiden. You never have been. You're afraid of someone not catching you." He didn't answer right away. The silence between them was heavy, not uncomfortable, just full. Then he crossed the distance slowly and handed her something wrapped in deep navy velvet. "What is this?" "Open it." She unwrapped the fabric, revealing a silver key with a small engraving on the handle. "It's the key to the new agency's office," he said. "You've earned it." Her fingers curled around the metal. "You could have sent this through your assistant." "I don't want to give you things, Catalina. I want to build things with you." She stared at him. "You're talking like this isn't temporary." "It's not. You don't know what I want next." "Then tell me." She hesitated, her thumb brushing over the key. "I want to pitch our first campaign to real clients. I want them to hear me speak and not assume I'm the assistant who got lost on her way to the coach room." "Done." "I want to hire people who were passed over because they didn't look the part." "Let's find them." Her voice cracked just slightly. "And I want to stop waiting for the moment this falls apart." Aiden stepped closer, his tone low but certain. "Then stop waiting." Catalina lifted her eyes to his, and for the first time she didn't look like she was bracing for impact. She leaned in slowly, and he met her halfway. Their kiss wasn't urgent. It was quiet, slow, the kind of kiss that didn't ask permission because it already belonged to them. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his chest. "I don't need a rescue," she whispered. "I know," he said, "but I needed one." "And you showed up." She exhaled against him, one hand still gripping the key like it was grounding her. He rubbed a hand down her back. "You stole my heart the night you refused to take my help. You just didn't know it yet." Catalina laughed, shaking her head. "I was soaked, angry, and convinced you were a walking cliché. And now I know you're worse. You're real." Aiden kissed the top of her head and pulled her closer. Outside, the storm that had threatened earlier never came. The sky was clear, the city humming softly beneath them. Catalina tilted her face toward the window again, eyes catching the reflection of the two of them standing still in a world that never stopped moving. She didn't know what would come next. She didn't know how many campaigns they'd launch, or how many rooms she'd have to walk into with her chin held high. But she knew this. She wasn't walking alone anymore, and it wasn't because someone had saved her. It was because someone had stood beside her and stayed. Catalina's heels clicked against the Carrara marble as she stepped into the boardroom. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed a sweeping view of the Hudson, but her eyes were fixed on the long conference table ahead lined with some of the most powerful brand executives in the country. They weren't here for Aiden. They were here for her. She didn't glance at him as she took her place at the head of the table. She didn't need to. She could feel his presence like gravity just behind her, watching but never overshadowing. "Good morning," she began, her voice even. "Let's talk about the story your brand isn't telling yet." By the time she clicked to the final slide 40 minutes later, the room had shifted, not in volume but in tone. The skepticism was gone. In its place was the kind of quiet that came from people realizing they'd underestimated someone. When the last executive stood and extended a hand, Catalina took it without hesitation. "I want to be clear," the woman said, her tone clipped but respectful. "If you're leading this campaign, we're in full budget." Catalina nodded once. "Then we'll be in touch with the first rollout next week." When the room cleared, she finally turned to Aiden. "You didn't say a word," she said. "You didn't need me to." Her shoulders dropped slightly, not in exhaustion but in release. "It actually worked. You didn't just convince them. You owned them. They'll expect results. Then we'll give them results." She walked to the window, looking out across the city. "You know, I used to think people like them didn't want someone like me in the room. But now I think they just didn't know where to put me." Aiden joined her at the glass. "They found out today." She turned to face him, her eyes steady. "I want to keep building this, not just the campaigns, the agency. I want to hire the ones who didn't get called back because their degrees weren't from the right schools." "Then let's start tomorrow," he said. "You'll have full autonomy." "I don't want it handed to me. I'm not handing it. I'm giving you room to shape it." Her voice softened. "And you? What is it you want out of this?" "I already got it," he said without hesitation. She frowned. "What do you mean, you? Not because of what you built, but because you didn't need to be saved and you still let me stand beside you." Catalina's throat tightened. "You're not going to wake up one morning and decide this was a phase." "No," he said. "You were the moment everything started making sense." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she stepped closer, resting her hand against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm beneath her palm. "I love you," she said quietly. "I wasn't sure I'd ever say that and mean it. You just did." Aiden leaned down, brushing his lips over hers, a kiss that held no urgency, only certainty. 3 months later, the agency, now officially named Rivers and Blake, launched its first global campaign with Catalina at the creative helm. The team she hand-picked came from every walk of life: writers who once worked 3 jobs, strategists who had been passed over for not fitting a mold, designers who had been told their work was too raw. Under her leadership, they flourished. Aiden kept his promise. He didn't interfere. But he was always there. Late-night brainstorming sessions turned into early morning walks on the rooftop of their shared townhouse in Chelsea. Meetings bled into dinners, and deadlines ended with champagne toasts on private balconies. It wasn't fairy tale perfect. There were disagreements, nights when stress frayed nerves, days when nothing went according to plan. But through it all, they never stopped choosing each other. On a clear spring evening, Catalina stepped out onto the rooftop to find the entire space transformed. Twinkling lights strung from the pergola, a small string quartet playing softly, and a table set for 2 with her favorite dishes. "You've outdone yourself," she said, surprised. "I haven't even started yet." Aiden reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a velvet box. Catalina froze. He opened it slowly to reveal a ring, simple, elegant, and unmistakably hers. "I didn't fall in love with you because you fit into my world. I fell in love with you because you changed it. And I want to build every version of the future with you." Catalina blinked, her hand covering her mouth for a moment before she nodded, unable to find the words. When she finally did, they came out in a whisper. "Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and she leaned into him, both laughing softly as the music carried through the air. Months passed, and their wedding was held in a converted greenhouse in the countryside, surrounded by wildflowers and the people who had watched them build something from nothing. Catalina walked down the aisle barefoot, her dress flowing behind her like wind, her eyes never leaving his. They exchanged vows they wrote themselves, neither too polished nor too practiced. Just honest. Promises of partnership, of laughter, of never letting go even when the world turned sideways. As they danced beneath the hanging vines and soft lanterns, Catalina whispered against his neck, "You know what the best part is?" "What? We didn't just fall in love, we built it," he smiled, pulling her closer. "And we'll keep building." Together, they didn't just rewrite their own stories. They created a world where love wasn't about saving or changing each other, but about standing side by side, fiercely, completely, and without apology. And in that world, they were home.